All right, welcome everyone back for another episode of Marketing Hops, where we share pints and perspectives on different things in the B2B sales and marketing space. I'm super excited to have Tracie on with us today. She has a really great background, really great perspectives to share with you all. But as we always start out, we start out with a cheers. Tracie, what are you sipping on today during our time?
I know. So today I'm just having a hard seltzer, but I put it in a fancy glass. It's got the Denver Nuggets and the Colorado Avalanche on it. So
All
hopefully
right.
those both
Which
teams
are
are
you a
going
bigger
to
fan
win.
of the Nuggets or the
Definitely the
Avalanche, which is your preferred
Nuggets.
team? All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I kind of figured that most people tend to lean that way. I'm getting over being sick a little bit here, so I made myself a little bit of a hot toddy today. But it's
Like,
got one of my absolute favorite whiskeys called the Devil's Brigade. It's from Willie's Distillery out of Montana. It's got a super fun story about World War II Special Forces training together
yeah.
with Canadians and stuff. So super good one and a
I
good
have to check
story
that
there.
out. I like a good whiskey, so I will check that out.
Highly recommend it. My dad asked for a couple bottles after he sampled it. So, and my best friend gave it to me, who was in the special forces and did some jump
Oh,
schools there
nice.
and stuff. So
Nice.
that's where I learned the story. But not what we're here to talk about. We said maybe we need to do a whole thing just on whiskey some point.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
as always, cheers! Thank you so much for being on the
Cheers.
show today. Sit here. So I wanted to start and kind of let the audience dig in a little bit around your background. Can you give us a little bit of your career story? What was the journey to becoming a marketing executive? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, sure. So I always say that I grew up in this ERP, CRM world. I worked for a Denver-based company called JD Edwards that was purchased by People's, and then it was purchased by Oracle. So I spent, sitting in the same cubicle at the time. I worked for 3 different companies, but I learned a ton during that time. I went to work for Big Blue. I went to work for IBM and
Oh,
spent 7 years working for IBM, doing demand generation, our global campaign creation, which was awesome. So I had the opportunity to work with our geographies around the world, like helping them localize their campaigns. IBM, I was recruited by Microsoft. So then went to Microsoft, where I was on the Dynamics team, so Microsoft Dynamics, which was their ERP and their CRM platform. And I feel like at Microsoft, I really learned marketing excellence. I mean, wonderful company to work for. Messaging, demand generation, reporting, all of those things I think we were very precise about. It gave me that background of really being on point with slides and with any kind of reporting, making sure that your numbers can tie it. Microsoft, a friend coworker of mine tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "Hey, do you want to come be the CMO at this company that's based in London and are rolling out their product to North America?" And I think quite naively, I said, "Oh yeah, that'd be fun to go work for a small company," thinking, coming from my big company background, clearly I knew a lot. No, not the case. I walked into that role and realized quite quickly that, as they say, I wasn't in Kansas anymore, and had to really dig in and understand all things of marketing, which was great because I got to learn branding, which, at Microsoft, I didn't really spend a lot of time in branding. They had a great brand and didn't need my help. Piece of it, messaging rollout, running events, demand generation. Got to lead a team that was international, which was really fun. Years working for that company. It was actually planning to move to London, and then COVID hit. So they were bringing all their leadership team back to the UK, and we were kind of like rethinking about how we were going to market into North America. And I was asked to move back, and then that was like February 2020, and then COVID hit.
And the world shut down.
The world shut down, so my dreams of moving to London just got shattered. I ended up then working for another startup in the fintech space, and was able to I was actually their first senior level marketing person, so I was able to work there, grow the marketing team, really put the foundation in place for demand generation, content, all the marketing, and then grew the team to about 7. And then, as a lot of startups found in 2023, we were closely joined Silicon Valley Bank. So a lot of things happened, and we're burning through our cash pretty quickly. So they had to go through quite a few
Yeah, the
layoffs.
grow at all costs playbooks and all
No, at
that
all
fun stuff that's
costs.
no
I
longer
know.
the case.
No, it's not. No, I think we've learned that you can't do
Yeah,
that.
yeah. That's
Yeah.
now is you ask you I operate off of the rule of 40 and all those kinds of things. So you've had a chance to kind of shift and grow teams and also see big versus small quite a bit there.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
would have
So
been some of like the biggest change or challenge that you ran into as you stepped into that marketing leadership for the first time, or kind of maybe it's a consistent one you've now seen a couple times, that just a consistent challenge you run into?
I think that one of the things that is consistent across both large companies and smaller companies is, the ability or the importance of sales and marketing together as a team. And I think that that's one of the things that I've worked really hard to do in my career, is to make sure that I'm aligned with my sales counterpart, and that our teams are aligned, and that we have
Mm-hmm.
common goals, which seems so simple, yet it's just is always, it's one of those things that's kind of difficult. You have the same goals, like we're all here with good intentions. We all business that we should be able to work really well together, but a lot of times that doesn't seem to be the case.
All right, well, let's pause on that one here for a second, because you're not wrong. I feel like I've run into this in nearly every company I've ever
Yeah.
worked at. That I'll say, in kind of B, I feel like we've been saying this for well over a decade, maybe multiple decades at this point. Maybe for since sales and marketing ever worked together, I don't know. But this concept of sales and marketing alignment is something everyone talks about, but everyone also seems to really struggle to figure out. Why do you think that is? Why do we struggle so much to drive that within organizations? Because your point, it feels like it should make sense,
Yeah.
yet we always struggle with it.
I think some part of it has to do with how the structure is set up, or the organization is set up. I mean, there's this big emphasis on attribution. Where did the lead come from? Was it a sales generated lead? Was it a marketing generated lead? Well, it probably neither. It touches everything. And hopefully marketing's doing a great job of air cover, so that when a salesperson does get on the phone with someone, that makes that conversation super easy. Well, I think that's part of it, of where it comes from, is like, I think, at the top level, a lot of times, if they don't understand marketing strategy, that there's just this question of, well, how many MQLs have you created? And how many of them have converted? And if the conversion rates are not awesome, then, it's like sales says, well, marketing's not creating any leads that we want to follow up on. And then, of course, the marketing team is like, well, we give you a lot of leads and you don't follow up on them. So there's that friction that happens.
There's a great cartoon, and it's been a saying for forever. It's kind of like, it's you throw the leads over, and it feels like your leads suck, but I need more of them, is the thing I think we hear a lot. But if you dive into that, and I think it's a thing that we've struggled with, kind of in the origins of marketing, a little bit of kind of the Mad Men marketing used to be about the brand and the ads and the prints and all that kind of stuff. And it was very tangible. If I hire another seller and they have $1 million a quota, 80% of them hit it, or whatever the math is, right? I can expect this in return. It's fairly definitive, right? I can add sellers, I can drive more sales. But with marketing, maybe that's kind of where a lot of it has come from. And I know my perspective is, we took forever in the early days of digital and marketing automation and all that kind of stuff. And we came up with this concept of the MQL, right? It was the first thing we felt like we had that was tangible, that we could hand over and give to sales. And it was kind of the first thing we could prove our worth on a little bit there as you went through that. But and so I feel like we've kind of struggled with that in businesses. It's really interesting. Now we actually talk about pipeline contribution and revenue contribution, and we're trying to get away from this MQL. But we spent the better part of a decade at this point training our CEOs that the MQL is that end all be all. Like, maybe that's where some of that comes from.
Yes,
I don't know. It's an interesting piece there.
The same thing with the board of directors. I mean, that's what we've trained them as well. And trying to change that conversation is it takes some time because these people aren't in our worlds all the time. So what they know is what we've trained them to know, which is we can generate marketing qualified leads. And you're right, we can go out and
Mm-hmm.
generate millions of those if we want. But if they're not actually contributing to the revenue, then it really doesn't matter. So I
Well,
think
it's
that's
an interesting.
the
Yeah, it's an interesting like so. I'll talk to, and this often happens at big companies, where it's like marketing is on the hook for an M2L number. I've seen it smaller companies too, but and when you talk to those CMOs and those heads of demand gen, honestly, like there's really easy ways to hit those numbers. You
Mhm.
can do content syndication. There's a bunch of
Right,
different programs you can do, right? I can basically do the math and say, you know, I pay $50 a lead and I need, 100 of those, and the math is very
right,
easy. I know what my budget is. What that doesn't do, and maybe this sparks to some of that misalignment, that doesn't mean that those are good. And so
right.
while I can hit a number, that starts to beg into the question of, what's the caliber, what's the quality
It's the
of
quality,
those
yeah,
as that comes over. But at the same time, I've also been in the opposite end of the spectrum where my team has driven 94% of meetings in the ICP, with relevant personas. They may not be the most senior executive, but like
sure,
they're in there. They're part of that buying committee, right? We know it's a
right.
big committee today, and yet we still get the same feedback from sales. That wasn't good, or this or that. What have you seen works in that instance? Like, how do you strike that balance? Because I feel like that's the thing we always face.
We always face it. And I don't know if I've got a perfect answer to it, but I think that having that open line of communication and really digging in with the marketing team and the sales teams to understand like where that deal fell through. And I think having that environment where it's okay, sellers, if deal didn't go through and, maybe they didn't actually have the budget or, things changed. It's okay to say that, not to say that, well, it wasn't, qualified by marketing in the first place. That's kind of asinine, honestly. I mean, it's on both of us to close the business. And if there's an issue that's, we're having a difficult time at a certain point in the pipeline that's not necessarily top of funnel, because we can top of funnel, we've kind of got that down, we can get that. But like as we could move through the sales cycle, what are the things and what are the triggers that marketing's pulling to help close that business? And I think
Right.
that's one of the things that's more difficult is figuring out what can we do from a marketing perspective when you're in a decision phase, like this is my calculator, or what is it that we can help you, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, to close the business. And I think that's kind of been most difficult. I think we've been so focused at top of funnel as marketers
Mm.
that we don't think about it through the entire sales cycle, or it becomes very difficult.
It's definitely an interesting perspective, like on that, because I think you said that open line of communication. Like one thing I always try to recommend, and I always try to do with my sales teams is, do we agree on who we're going after? Let's just make sure that we can address that top of funnel to your point, right? Like, how are we agreeing on the accounts that we should focus on? Who are the people we want those meetings with? As long as we're hitting like those two things, and maybe
Yes.
there's a third element. Maybe you want to overlay, like I know Sixth Sense has their six QA or right intent
Yeah.
qualify. Like there's a bunch, or maybe they've been to the website. You can put some other parameters on it and things like that. But hey, in general, if we get you meetings with these accounts and these types of people, are you going to be happy? Right?
Right.
Like, let's lock on that. That's always a part I like to make sure, because I do find that ICP conversation, if sales has a different ICP or they're only working a named account list, then they're not going to pay attention to your leads and vice versa.
Right.
And just like
Right.
lock on that. I think that's a space where a lot of marketers still kind of struggle a little bit there. But then to your point on like what can we do mid funnel, I think that's a really interesting lens on that, because now it's not only about filling the top of the funnel, it's also about addressing sales velocity, right? Like conversion rates where they're getting stuck, shortening a sales cycle, maybe
Exactly.
increasing deal size. What's some tactics? You mentioned ROI calculator. What are some tactics that you found that kind of resonate with sellers, or what works? And also maybe things that haven't worked in that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it is aligning the content with that part of the funnel, which is not easy. And sometimes it's, it's like, for example, at a company that I work for, this was at Microsoft actually. It was like we had a template for how to go to your manager or your CEO to get budget. Like, this is the step. Here's the beautiful proposal that you can go take to them. It has ROI, it has case studies, it has all this stuff in it. Like, that was, bottom of funnel type thing. And those things work. And then the ROI and having this is readily and available. Like, does marketing play a role in that? So at JD Edwards, we had a whole reference team, and we had a group of references that were available for site visits, that were available to talk to customers, and they got credits for their maintenance when they participated in this program. So it was easy for a seller to say, okay, I need a reference in the construction space, and we would say, okay, we have these. And then they would do a lot of times
to drive that.
Visits at that time, so this was a long time ago. Well, there are different things that that marketing was helping to do to close that business, because that's ultimately what matters.
Yeah.
That I have the code cracked, to constantly work with the sales team to understand, what they can use in their events that we're going to be at, that they can invite, prospects to, or we have a dinner, like things like that are more face to face.
Yeah, I think you brought up two interesting points there. I think events, number one, is an interesting element. I've always viewed like big trade shows as not typically top of funnel, right? They're branding exercises, and then they're usually pipeline acceleration and customer relations, right? Like, we're going to talk to deals already in flight. We're going to get some FaceTime with them, but also like these first party events that I think we're seeing starting to come back in terms of popularity, because people want to connect. They want the human interaction. Those are great. They can drive some top of funnel, but again, they're really great for that pipeline acceleration, getting your sellers in the room, creating an experience for those teams. To your comment on diagnosing where the issues are in the pipeline, do you have any best practices or any thoughts on kind of what's a good way to do that? Like,
well, I mean, it's digging into that data and their sales counterpart to understand where things are falling down. And that's not always an easy conversation, because that's where it comes in. Like, you're blaming us for, not able to move from discovery to whatever the next stage is. And so, like, looking at, but if the data shows that's where we're falling off, like, this has happened for the last company I worked at. We were great top of funnel, and we were getting our ICP, and really no reason why these women, in our minds as marketers, why these aren't flowing through the funnel. But they were falling out after discovery. And what we found is that our solution was so complex that we really needed to be trained or educating the market more and providing that educational material at that point, so that they didn't go just quiet and say, my God, this is so ridiculously hard. We just don't know what to do. Then saying, yeah, it's hard, but here's how we're going to help you in developing those materials so that the sales team could make them feel more comfortable about moving forward. So digging in with your sales team. And it wasn't anyone's fault. There's no one to blame. It's just like, oh, we're missing this in our sellers or in our buyer's journey, right? So let's fix it.
I think that's the key, is like you have to have trust between the teams, and you have to have those open lines communications. Like, hey, it's not working. Let's figure out why and be okay with what we find. We might find that maybe we're bringing in the wrong titles, and it's somebody else that we really need to get, and it's, marketing needs to adjust some of what it's doing, or we might find that there's a gap elsewhere in what's going on, or we might find that maybe there's some more enablement needed because we're missing on some critical pieces as you go through that. But I think that sounds well and good until people aren't hitting quota and you're not hitting revenue, because then people are worried their jobs are on the line. That's often, I feel like, it's like you got to get ahead of that, and you need to be proactively solving this when times are good, and have that process, because when times are not good, that's very often where I've run into like walls and finger pointing and that kind of stuff. Even if you try to start with that best intention, that will get you to a better resolution faster. You often can run into that,
and that is so difficult to navigate. And that's when you have those random acts of marketing, like it's Q4, let's go and put a customer webinar on and let's try and cross-sell something or other, and then you never get good results. And then of course you're not focusing on then your next quarter or the next year. So then you start off slow. So it's one of those things that it's just, I think having that communication open and as a marketing team, it doesn't always work. But if you're setting those expectations, at least you voiced, what you think, what's not going to make a difference. And listen, we're all on the
Mhm.
same team. And if we really believe that this campaign we're going to run right now is going to work, we're all on board to do it. But,
Yeah.
know that that's kind of taking away from what we're doing for Q1 or Q2 or whatever it may be. And people don't always like to
Which
hear
every
that.
seller will always tell you, do it because I need to hit quota now. But then the next quarter, when you're coming up short on the volume of
Right.
leads, right? It's
Exactly.
like you have to remind them
Exactly.
about the decisions that were made back then. But again, they don't necessarily care. And that's how you almost get into
Yeah.
this constant firefighting drill
Yeah.
as you go through that.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, times are
Uh,
always good, right? And we're just happily
well,
going along.
fortunately, that's not the way the economy last year
Ever,
flowed, nor I
ever.
think this year per se. It feels like it's going.
I
But
know.
what
I know.
a couple things I'd be curious your thoughts. A couple things I've had the privilege of doing, and then I think there's some best practices even just like that everyone can do. One of the new ones I've come up with is what I call like an opportunity grade, which is not a lead score. It's
Mhm.
hey, we had this first meeting, and on on an A to F seller, give this a grade, and then put in why. Because what that does is it says at this at this mark of time when the
Mhm.
lead was handed off, right, when we had our first meeting or whatever that was, the seller felt this way about it. It creates
Yeah.
a really quick feedback loop. If you're getting a lot,
Yeah.
C's and D's, and you
Yeah.
understand the why, you can adjust what you're doing. If you're getting lots of A's and B's and then they're not converting, that means there's something a little bit further downstream that we want to
Right.
dig into. But what that does do is it creates it plays both offense and defense. It creates a moment in time for great fast feedback so we can adjust if something's not right. But it
Yeah.
also creates and stops the blame game in the future if particular two or three sellers are struggling. It's like you said these were good and this was why, so that means there's something else going on here versus like,
Yeah.
oh no, those leads that I got 3 months ago because our sales cycle is long were bad. It's like,
Right.
no, there's the truth is somewhere in the middle there. Now,
Yeah.
the best experience I ever had, I sat down with our FP&A team, and we did regression analysis and a bunch of cool stuff on the pipeline. Now, this said, and because your thoughts on it, your Salesforce data has to be reasonable, right? Your sellers actually have to put stuff when it moves stage to stage. You have to actually
Yes.
put contacts in there when they move forward, right? Because otherwise you don't have data, and the data sucks.
So,
And so we were fortunate. We had driven it in. We had some cool tools like People AI and stuff that generated and pulled that stuff in. But what we found were there were three critical things where our deals fell off a cliff. And it was so insightful. And the first was if it didn't have any activity on the account in the last 14 days. It was actually the last 7, but we kind of put a backstop in there. It was if the deal didn't have the products associated with it, meant the seller didn't know enough about it to be like, this is what I think I'm actually going to sell.
yeah.
And then the third was if it sat in the stage longer than 60 days.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so what this let us do with our rep ops team was go and map this out and say, here are your early warning indicators,
Yeah.
sellers and sales managers. And then as marketing, we could sit in there and be like, okay, we're getting stuck here. What
Yeah.
are we hearing? What's happening here? How can we help you unstuck those things? And it made a really different mentality. It gave us an early warning indicator when deals were stalling or going to, stalling is not a status in Salesforce is a phrase I've heard and I've used as you go
Yeah.
through
I
that.
agree
And
with that.
so
Yeah.
like it gave us a good picture and also a good early warning indicator, but I haven't been able to replicate that at every company I've been at because more often than not the data is bad, and so we can't do those kinds
Yeah.
of insights and analysis.
Yeah,
What are
I
your thoughts
love
on all
that.
that?
I absolutely love that approach. If you can get buy-in from the sales team and actually have some good data, I love that idea of giving it a grade. Yeah, because they're leads, right? That, I mean, we probably think as marketers, naively or whatever, that if you accepted a lead, it's the best lead ever. Not necessarily the case, right? And there isn't
Right.
that feedback loop to say, yeah, no, this was good, and we're going to move forward with it. These are the things that are missing from it, or this is what we'd like to see in the
Right.
future.
Like,
So yeah,
it's a C. I'll work it because I need
yeah,
pipeline, but it's
right,
missing these critical
yeah,
things. Like, oh, that's
exactly.
actually really helpful.
That's very helpful. Yes. Yeah, and I think it's you said this also is getting the helping having the sales reps understand the importance and the data and the insights that we can get from that kind of information that are only going to help them sell in the future. So taking the extra 5 minutes or whatever it is, to make sure the data is clean and that you're giving this feedback is so crucial. Because I mean, as we all are super busy, none of us want to be filling out forms and
No.
things like that in tools.
Well, there's tools that can help you with it. They're usually pretty expensive, although I'm hoping with AI and Gen AI it's going to get better. But like even like I've sat down with my RevOps team at the end. It depends on your deal volume too. Like, are you talking hundreds and thousands, or are you talking 10 or 20 deals a quarter, right? But one thing I've done is you've gone back and looked at the closed won deals. We had Gong at the time. We would actually pull up the Gong record on the op and look at all the people that were involved, and then we would add them to CRM. So we wouldn't leave it to the seller to do it, but we would do that because for us, that data was invaluable. Who are the people who had to be around the table consistently, and what were their titles?
Yes.
So that we can start building that buying committee as marketing.
Exactly.
And sales wasn't necessarily wanting to put all that in there. Yeah, it's not worth it. I've got my one contact on the op record, and we'll call that good. But that was kind of one of the ways, like, we kind of just did it because we needed the data so much, and it also helped us, have a better narrative for what we were working on. Because, we touched 6 of these contacts that were not on this record during our marketing efforts and stuff like that.
Yep. Yes. Having to go back, doing that kind of retroactive analysis is really helpful. And it's always trying to find the time to do it. But I agree. I mean, we've done that before where we've had, a CEO or someone in leadership say, well, marketing didn't touch these, so I don't think these channels are working. Well, in fact, marketing did touch these, and it's exactly what you said. It wasn't on the deal record. The contacts that we've been working with weren't on the deal record. I mean, the fact that you have to go back and prove that is, but 9 times out of 10, that is the case. And I mean, if you're getting that data in and out of your CRM, then it helps us figure out exactly who we should be messaging and targeting and pulling deals in and being able to expand our reach a little bit.
I think that's a big part, that you don't wait to be asked.
Yes.
Like, have a plan and proactively identify some of those gaps and go and try to pull that information in. Do the analysis that you can, get further down the funnel. And one thing I try to make it part of our metrics that we measure the team by is I want everybody listening to at least 2 Gong calls a week. Because you're also at a better advantage, like, because sales, I talked to so-and-so and they said this, this, and this. And it's like, well, actually, I listened to these different calls and this. It gives you the ability to have that voice of market and bring it back to what you're doing there. And so it builds a lot more credibility for you as marketing. And so you can start to proactively bring these insights up to the business. Hey, here's a trend that we're seeing. Here's a pattern. We know multi-threading is really important based on all the data that we're seeing. We know that, we need these deals and stuff in there. So what's our plan going forward to round this out in opportunities, and bring that forward to the organization and show the data versus waiting until it's like, well, marketing, to your point, right? Marketing didn't touch these ops.
And then you're scrambling.
What's going on?
Yeah, 100%.
Then you're pulling a bunch of reports, you're on the defensive, and they've probably already formed an opinion a little bit going through that versus you being kind of proactive in that.
Being proactive with it. The same thing in my last role was making sure that we were all listening to those sales calls. It helped us so much with messaging, with understanding the objections, and validating even what we were putting out there. And that, I think, and we have the technology to do it now. So, I mean, we definitely had that as part of our KPIs. I implemented that as part of our KPIs in my last role as well. And for myself, because you get so busy also. And also, you get into your sales and marketing meetings and try and, get what you can out of the sales reps, but it's not fresh in their minds either. So I think as just part of what we need to do as marketers is a lot, you're right, be proactive and do a lot of this stuff, before we're being asked.
So I don't think this challenge is necessarily going to go away.
No,
I think we've talked some on what we're doing, ideas people could potentially take and execute as they go through that. What, as you look ahead in kind of the current world, what do you think are some of the other biggest, or maybe the biggest, maybe it is that, and so it's a different one, but what is the other biggest challenge that you see ahead for marketers right now?
Well, one thing I think an opportunity is really understanding AI and how it's affecting our worlds. I mean, I think that's a challenge. I mean, there's so much to learn and there's many ways to utilize it. I think getting around that and figuring out how you can incorporate that in your marketing strategy is an opportunity challenge. I think that it's because it's so new, trying to figure it out takes some time and studying it and trying to figure it out as it's going. Like it's not like it's a product that's out there and that we can go take off the shelf and start using. I think it's constantly being refined and there's so many new things to learn. So I think that's a big thing, at least in my world, as I'm thinking about how I marketer. The thing is like the continuing the challenge of and I think getting better, but marketing having a place at the table and having their voice and strategy. And as everyone knows, like the sellers in B2B and SaaS, the way buyers buy now is so different. We've been talking about it for years. Marketing does need to have that place at the leadership table and, bringing the strategy of what marketing is so that we can make selling easier. Those two things. I think that's always a challenge. It has been a challenge for marketing anyway in the past, but like I said, I think it's getting better. But I think we'll continue to be a challenge in making sure that our voice is heard and that the leadership teams, our boards understand marketing strategy. Can you hear marketing? Can you go make this deck look pretty? I mean, you still get that. And that's, I mean, and great. Yes, of course we can do that, but that's not really adding a ton of value to overall. So I think that's
the fluffy stuff that it matters, but you got to be careful because if that's all you do, you're now a service bureau, and half the time you run into the seller who's still using the deck that's 3 years old and on the old branding and all that fun stuff, and it's like, I feel like that's a challenge. It's going to continue to face this no matter what.
Very true. Very true.
So I always love to ask this question: what in your career was like the campaign or the hire or the thing that you did that was like that you're most proud of?
Most proud of. Well, to give you two things, when I was at Microsoft, I was fortunate. I got to work. I was in public sector, so I worked for managed healthcare and education are the verticals that I took care of. And one of the things that was so amazing was getting to work on it was the opioid crisis. And our platform at the time this is crazy. It had the analytics to go to states and say, in this particular county, we're seeing a high death score. What we called it was a death score. So if there's no intervention being done, like people are going to start dying, opioid epidemic going on. And so I was able to work on that project with the entire team, but had a small part in it and bringing the content, bringing that messaging forward. We had a really difficult time getting the states to buy in because of the data privacy issues. Even though it was masked, it was one of those things. But on our team went in front of Congress, spoke about it. I mean, it was a fascinating project to work on. So like it's such a proud so you're like, wow, I'm doing some real good in the world, like what I'm doing at work.
That's a part I think a lot of people, it's like we're not saving lives is a thing very often. Like I've said to my teams in the past and whatnot, it's like it's a PowerPoint slide to sell a thing. But in your instance, you were saving lives, and that's definitely something to be proud of.
So I was felt so fortunate that I got to work on some of those things. We had child welfare and things like that we worked on as well. And I remember people when I was actually handed public sector because the person had left, and I had another day job. And they said, "You're doing both right now." And then when we were able to backfill, I got to choose, and I chose public sector. People thought I was crazy, but I mean, just because of the interesting things that I got to work on. So that was it was something that was really fun to work on. I think the other thing that I just did recently is ran an event, an unconference conference at Coors Field here in Denver, and it's an amazing venue for and learning from each other and not doing PowerPoints and not doing and we did have some keynote speakers that did an event where people could collaborate in a super fun environment. So it was at Coors Field. We did whiskey tasting as it, like, those were your sponsorships. There were no booths or anything like that, but you could sponsor a whiskey bottle and we'll do some whiskey tasting. So that was a
Nice.
really fun event to work on. And as far as deal velocity, it worked very well. Top of funnel, make the right expectations with these events, because, you know, a lot of times your leadership team will say, okay, well, what are the leads that we got from it? Well, we got 5, but we closed $10 million worth of business. So
Right.
those.
What was the goal of the event? It was not top of funnel. We got a little bit of that, but
yes, exactly. So I was really proud of that event, and the team worked so hard. I mean, we actually thought we were going to die working on that event, but everyone worked really hard, and it came together in the end. So it was really great.
That sounds awesome. Sounds like an event I would have wanted to go to. Which is, I think, the current measure of stuff is like, is this something I actually want to take time away from my family? It's I have a test I call the hard pants test. Like, do I want to get dressed up, you know, put on jeans or whatever, and go out and spend an evening away from my family or an afternoon away from them, with everything else that's going on? And it takes a pretty compelling experience to draw that out from people nowadays. But that's what people are craving also.
Yes. Yeah, true. Very true.
So another question I always love to ask is, everybody's got their favorite tech stack. There are a couple key things that they always have to have. What are like your biggest 3 across sales and marketing that you've got to have?
Yeah, I have to have, well, I'm a HubSpot fan. I've been working with it for a long time. I've done HubSpot, Salesforce, and then I have to have intent data. I've got to have data. I love data. I use ZoomInfo. I'm dying to use 6 Sense. I've had demos. I was in my previous role, we were going to bring it on board and a bunch of stuff got, so you know how that goes. But I think that, you know, having those just fundamental, the foundational pieces that work really well, and then having access to data that enables you to, you know, make some good decisions. That's what I've worked with in the past. What are yours? Or yeah, I was going to say, was it, you have to have intent, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's the blending of third party and first party nowadays is definitely jumping out a little bit more. Kind of, it's going to be curious to see what happens to the intent data category with cookies going away. And so that's going to be a really interesting piece just to watch volume, quality, as you go through that. The tricky part with intent data is people expect it to be a silver bullet. It's like, ooh, they're researching what I have to sell. I should be able to call them and get an opportunity. It'll close in a week. It's like, no, that's not at all how this works. Like, we're not changing the sales cycle. What we're doing is identifying someone entering into it and where they are on that journey, which then we need to correspond the data in our content to where they are in that journey. So, you know, for me, I think I put ChatGPT at the top, probably near the top of that list. I use it almost daily now and have a lot of my prompts and stuff designed. But for me, that's definitely up there. Some sort of chatbot. Right now, I'm kind of loving Qualified. Some really cool interactions and ability to do personalization with what's going on there. They've got a capability called Signals that I think is really cool. I like to geek out on that stuff. And trying to come up with a third. I mean, some kind of level of ABM intent. Like, for me, most of the programs I run are ABM in nature in some way, shape, or form. It's just a question of, like, how you define that ideal customer profile. To me, is you've got those that are showing intent, those that are not showing intent. And then even in those that aren't showing intent, you've got those that are your customers, those that are your competitors' customers, and those that are nobody's customers. And so to me, you've got different messages that you kind of put in and around each one of those. Some of it's branding, some of it's, you know, competitive takeout, some of it's loyalty, right? Like, you don't want to forget about your customers and that whole vein. And so to me, I always try to have something that will let me orchestrate those types of programs out to them there. But no, it's definitely an interesting vein on those techs that are there.
There's so much out there right now too.
Brinker's latest MarketScape was well over 10,000. Like, I can't even look at it anymore. Like, you need a magnifying glass to zoom in on like all the different logos, because there's just so much.
There's so much to know.
So while we're talking tech stack, I'd be curious your take. So it's a trend that I think we will see. I think there's early adopters of it right now. And I think with the data disruption that's coming with kind of third-party cookies and stuff, I think we're going to see the rise of kind of the CDP, the customer data platform, of trying to, and a lot of companies tried to do this a long time ago. Microsoft, I know they had one, I think it was called Jarvis, way back in the day.
Yeah.
And so, and like I know IBM has one, except like the big companies have been doing this for a long time, but it's getting more accessible where it's I need to aggregate all of my data, my CRM, my intent data, my ad data, my email data, my usage data, all of it into a customer data platform like a Segment, and Snowflake has one that's similar, because brands are kind of having to create their own intent signals to some extent of smashing all this together to really understand it. But and I think it'll get a lot easier as generative AI can then sit on top of something like that. You can ask it and query questions and stuff like that. But I think it's emerging, but I think it's going to become a super hot vein here in the next, call it 3 years.
Right. A way to aggregate all of that data that's out there and do something useful with it. I think that's the key. Yeah.
Because right now it sits in your HubSpot, and then you got to tie that to your Google Analytics, and then you got to tie that to this, and tie it to that, and tie it to this. And good marketing ops and rev ops people can kind of do it, but it's still not perfect. And so that's the part where I feel like we're headed towards a point now with generative AI and these data platforms that as those mash together, I think we can see some pretty cool stuff.
Right. And that's something as a marketer, always asking for. Like, what can you just aggregate all of this for me so I can make decisions instead of like this? And then, I think that you're spot on there. Yeah, that would be very powerful. But you're right. It's probably just around the corner.
If somebody's listening and you want to do a startup on it, you got 2 advisors here.
Yeah. We're welcome. We'll take a little stock. We're fine.
So I know we're coming up on time here as we go through this. The last question for you. If you could give a young marketer or person time and give a piece of advice to yourself or a young marketer today, what is that thing that you would share with them that you think would make a huge impact on their career?
Yeah. This is maybe more towards my younger self. I'm not sure all leaders are like this, but I would say in what you know, and marketing as a strategy. And I think that took me a while to really flex that muscle, as they say, and to be with, not everyone's going to agree, but stand your ground, have your data to back you up, and also be willing to say no. Like, no, we're not doing that. I mean, I think a tendency for marketers, or maybe me, is like I want to please. I'm a team player. I want us to be able to do everything. Well, that doesn't work, and it's okay. To not please every single person on the your leadership team, your sales team, your customer success team. Like, everyone wants a piece of marketing, and I think that it's okay to say no. And to stand by marketing strategy and what you know. I think that's advice that I would give to myself, to not worry as much as I did. About like, is everyone going to understand this? Is everyone going to like the decisions I make? I think I would say relax and your stuff.
Well, if you ask anybody, anyone can do marketing. It's very easy, of course. So
yeah.
So I do think that's important, though, right? To have that stance and to look at that.
Yeah.
And the part I guess I might add on to that would be explain the trade-offs too, because to your point, everybody wants a piece of marketing, and the conversation in their world is what's most important to them. And they probably don't have context of everything else that you're doing, what you're prioritizing and why. And so share that with them, and they may not like it, but at least they'll understand why you're doing what you're doing versus just being, I feel like marketing can be similar to the CF no of just like, well, marketing never does what we need them to. It's like, well, it's not because they don't want to, it's because they actually have a lot of stuff going on.
Right. That's a very good point. And communicating what you're doing. I've fallen into that before, where I just, heads down, we're getting a bunch of stuff done, and then people are like, we didn't do that. Well, I'm the communicator. I should have been communicating more with you on what we were doing.
Internal PR.
Yeah.
No, I love that. I think that's great. Well, thank you so much for being on today. This was an awesome conversation. I got a little into the spicy realm of the sales and marketing alignment there. hopefully, I know I took away some new ideas from
Yeah,
this,
me
so
too. No,
hopefully
this has
others
been
did as
great.
well.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Tracie, thank you for being on Marketing Hops, and have a great rest of your day. And cheers. Thanks for being on.
Cheers. Cheers.